Hey everybody, if you're watching this, thank you. Also, please be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. All right, so I'm just getting on here because we were off today for Eid, the Muslim holiday, the end of Ramadan. And I just had some things that have been on my mind that have been pointed out that I've seen and noticed. So I just want to talk about them for a second. First of all, shout out to the number one HBCU in all the land from which I hail as an alum, magna cum laude, Phi Beta Kappa at Spelman College. Okay, as y'all, I'm sure some of y'all have noticed on TikTok or whatever that the Miss Spelman pageant 2025. They have really upped their social media game. I got to give it to them. They're really competing. It wasn't always like this. Like girls competed, and you really the winner is typically somebody who raises the most money. Maybe they're actually pretending like there's a real voting system, but nevertheless, it's fun, right? It's fun. I think what kind of bothers me just a little bit, it's not the traditions, the extraness of the Miss Spelman pageant, what it means to, do the Spelman stuff. Founded in 1881 by Sophia E. Giles and, you know, Harriet E. Giles and Sophia B. Packer. I gotta get up on my history. What was I thinking? But what bothers me is the number of white people and non-black people making these reaction videos to it. And the ones I've seen, don't get me wrong, they've been positive, but there is something it gets to my soul. And this is, I think, the plus or minus of technology in this way is because so many things belong to the African American tradition. And I know people like to ask, sometimes from a place of insecurity, sometimes they're curious, but they like to question HBCU graduates, like, well, what's the big deal? College is college, we have a strong, oftentimes, emotional attachment to whatever HBCU we went to because that is the last time in life you'll ever have that kind of experience. And it's rare, and there are very few things that belong just to Black people. And I think my concern with so many white people and non-black people watching it and like, oh, it's great. The next thing you know, they'll be stealing it, claiming it was always a part of their tradition at these white schools. We've been doing this the whole time, and they have never been doing. All they will do is imitate and copy. Y'all know how they steal from us. But nevertheless, I wish all the young ladies luck. And if not, just preparing for the Miss Spelman pageant. Girl, I know it's a lot of work. Okay, it's a lot of work, and it's for certain girls. And there's the Miss Black and Gold, which is typically it would be Spelman contestants and girls from Clark Atlanta competing for to be Miss Black and Gold for the Alphas at Morehouse. But typically, no, actually, I don't. Sometimes I do think some Clark girls were able to do it, but it didn't really make any sense because the Alphas at Clark. But anyway, but it's enjoyable, but I just wonder about that. But nevertheless, good luck to all of them. I love HBCU traditions, continuing, growing, expanding. I love it. I love it. Speaking of which, tomorrow, I don't know if any of my Spelman sisters watch this, but anyway, speaking of tomorrow, no matter when you graduated, the Founders Day push, and I know this is my class year. I'm supposed to have a class reunion. I don't plan to attend, but nevertheless, we'll be giving. All right. Number two, this is just something small, but is it just me on TikTok? And TikTok is one of my favorite forms of entertainment. Okay, it really is. The TikTok, have y'all seen those videos? I know y'all have because they're everywhere. Those videos where somebody is like laughing hysterically and it's like a little caption. And I promise you, it is never funny. It is never funny. The people with all that hysterical laughing, please stop using that. It's not funny. If it's funny, we'll laugh. We do not need your help. Anyway, so over the weekend, and I saw this over the weekend at Pentagon City Mall in Arlington, Virginia, and I know because I used to live in Arlington for a year when I was working on my PhD doing research in DC. Anyway, Pentagon City Mall was someplace I would go to clear my mind. Well, apparently fights broke out all over the food court, and I was like, and it wasn't like a black mall or a white mall, or it at times it did seem more white to me. But there was, it's Virginia, so it was mixed or whatever. But nevertheless, 3 black kids, despite the multiple fights, were charged. 13, like 2, I think, were 13, and the other one was 15. All of them got charges for assaulting officers, assaulting, and then a 15-year-old got the one boy, he had a knife, and so he got charged for that and assaulting an officer. 13-year-old girl assaulted an officer, I guess by fighting back. Now it did look like some excessive force, but that many fights breaking out on a Saturday in the food court to the point where everybody had to clear out the mall. I just said, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And it was just kind of like weird to watch because you're like, they interviewed one man who worked at the mall and he was like, honestly, I've never seen anything like that before in my life. He was like, it kind of seems gang related because, I mean, stuff happens at the mall all the time, but for something like that to blow up. Anyway, but that just seemed kind of crazy to me. So, and they were like numerous fights broke out at the simultaneously. I said, the youth, who is raising them? And, even me growing up, okay, I was born in 87. I'm 37 years old. Even me growing up, the idea that you should know better was actually something that people would say, you know better. And you can assume they knew better. I don't even know. Teaching has taught me a lot. And no, it's not a race thing the same way. It's not a class thing. I don't know who is raising these people, but they're not. A lot of them are not. There are people who get married, who are rich, who have these setups, and then have nothing to do with their children. There are people who are having children who are not prepared to spend the kind of time and love, because I don't believe in blaming money on things like children, life happens, so on and so forth. But like, you cannot presume people know better or have been taught better. And I was talking to a friend of mine, and she was like, but at some point, an adult, like a teacher, a principal, somebody has corrected you. I said, see, that's the disconnect for me. And she was like, what do you mean? And I was like, because you are comparing that to a time probably 2005 and before. I said, presuming there is so much disrespect toward teachers just in general, from the way our government, and I'm talking about even before Trump, the way our government talks about teachers being lazy and how they're unqualified and how they just look to get off and, all this kind of stuff. I said, the way parents are allowed to disrespect teachers and come up and talk to them and curse them out and say anything they want. I said, a teacher saying something means nothing to them. Nothing. It doesn't mean what it used to mean. Like, you don't want your teacher calling home. They don't care. So even that idea of respecting people, respecting your elders or a certain order, even if you don't like them, that is not something. I mean, what are they supposed to do? Listen to you and then their parents go home and talk about you like a dog and saying they're going to cuss you out, call the school. Oh, what difference does it make? You see what I mean? Anyway. But yeah, that was Pentagon City Mall. Y'all can look at that foolishness if you want to. I wouldn't recommend it. Okay, so at Columbia University is just one of many institutions that have caved so far to Donald Trump and his authoritarian like style of governing. Like CNN, as soon as he was elected, told their major anchors to go easy on the president, give him a chance. Like this was his first term or some shit. ABC, was it ABC or CBS? I want to say maybe it was CBS that paid out after George Stephanopoulos had said that Donald Trump was found guilty of sexual assault in a civil case, and he used the word like rape, and then it was like, well, it was sexual assault, and I'm like, anyway, like all of these people, and Columbia has now decided to kowtow to Donald Trump so they can get federal funds. Now, I know there's going to be people that go, well, what were they supposed to do? It's Columbia University. Columbia University is an Ivy League for a reason. And an Ivy League does not mean, despite the way we treat them, Ivy Leagues are called Ivy Leagues because Ivy would grow down the buildings. And it's like the first 6 or 7 universities that were built in this country. That's it. Okay? But nevertheless, they have a $14.8 billion endowment. They have more than enough money. Their alums alone can support the institution for like decades at a time, just with their giving back in donations. They didn't need that money. It's not like, if HBCU sometimes, depending on their endowments, if they have to accept federal funds, or smaller, like white liberal arts schools may have to, if they're the kind of people that let in people with financial, whose parents just don't have the financial wherewithal to pay, $60,000, $80,000 a year in tuition, they do need federal support and grants and things like that. Columbia can literally let those people in. They're not their majority, and still support them. And the thing is, all of this because students were protesting on campus against Israel's genocide that the United States has been an active part and might as well be a co-partner, because as long as you are selling them weapons and there is no weapons embargo or anything like that, we have agreed to send over weapons to murder people indiscriminately in Gaza and throughout Palestine. And because people are protesting that, just from their individual protests, the police came, y'all remember, it wasn't even a year ago now, arresting people, doing all the stuff. And you remember the college presidents, they got rid of the black woman at Harvard. They pushed out the woman that was at UPenn, the president, and at Columbia. So they decided in order to get Donald Trump's funding that they would do the things that he said and basically make it hard for people who are going to protest. So anyway, the alums from the School of International and Public Affairs, they was outside protesting. And one white woman, she tore up her degree. She got over the microphone and tore it up. And I was like, I understand the symbolism, but we all know whatever good job you have, that transcript ain't going nowhere. You just had a copy of it and tore it up. But nevertheless, I understand the symbolism. But they're there because this week they have the largest, there's that particular school in and of itself, International and Public Affairs, they have the largest alumni celebration of any school to fundraise for the university. And the people were making the points that they were interviewing, like Columbia, they were like, Columbia brags about its students standing in the face of the unjust war in Vietnam, and why was it okay then and criminalized now? And as she was talking, I completely understood, but at the same time, it wasn't. People went to jail for protesting Vietnam all the time. Martin Luther King came out against Vietnam literally on April 4th, 1967. He was killed that same day. That's how calculated it was to make sure Negro know your place. Because he said, I'm not going to stand for a war and support that, because the same thing that allows that sort of misuse of funds when they could be funding schools and helping poor people, so on and so forth, and I'm going to support them and going to destroy a brown nation, I'm not going to do it. And they didn't like that. It was criminalized, and plenty of people went to jail. Plenty of people were kicked out of school over that. And people love to brag about the legacy after the stuff is gone, right? After the moment has passed and you can look back on it and say, oh yeah, they were right. Okay, us celebrating the civil rights movement, knowing how many people were killed, snatched up off the street, nameless. Black people fighting for their rights, how many people's houses were bombed and they were killed in them. They were bombing churches. That wasn't because America was on the right side of history. Now up until, I guess, this election of Donald Trump, I mean, there was still a general understanding that that was best for the country, but not because it wasn't criminalized. So I say, keep up the good fight or whatever. Because they were talking. They were like, it's a bastion of free speech and academic freedom. And that was headed in a dangerous direction. And it is, because I was talking to a Columbia University alum, a black man, an older black man, much older. And he was saying, he was the one telling me about, donations and supporting, and how Columbia, even when they accepted him in the late 60s, he was like, I stood up for the racial issues that I was experiencing, that and the other, in seminars and graduate seminars. He said they didn't have to let me talk. They could have put me out of that program. He said, but they didn't. He said, matter of fact, they respected it. He said, even if they didn't like it, they respected my thoughts. And he said that in and of itself, y'all, just so y'all know, colleges and universities, their whole setup is designed to encourage free thinking. Right? To help you engage and look at things critically and change your mind. It's supposed to be a bastion of free speech anywhere. And Columbia has done that, and as an institution of higher learning has now kowtowed to a freaking moron who's a maniac with power. And everybody's going around scared. People are only powerful if you let them be. You do realize that, right? The people decide whether or not we think somebody is powerful, and then people treat them accordingly.
Okay, so Married to Medicine, part two. These women are a piece of work. I'm sorry. They are a bit much, but I just want to go over a few things. So Quad and Sweet Tea. Um, Sweet Tea, Quad is not jealous of you. No, I don't think she is. There actually is no evidence for that. I think she doesn't like you because you were brought on this show and you were brought on with her ex-husband, who she has tried to explain to people mistreated her. She has even said abused her. Um, and she said the person doesn't change, just the woman in the situation. And she was absolutely right. However, I mean, was Sweet Tea just supposed to sit there and just take it? Even if it's a lame read, you still got to stand up for yourself. You still got to stand for something. Like, you can't just sit there and let somebody just go in on you, even if that's the only thing you think. And Quad was like, well, you're the one. I didn't have to do what you did. You're the one running into his DMs, promising him a baby that you still haven't made good on that promise yet. And I was like, Quad, to me, I don't care what anybody says, that was low. It was low. It's Sweet Tea's business is already out there. I do think y'all are mean to her. But just her being with Greg and what kind of man he is, we already know where this is going to end up. So, I mean, just her basic life on TV is already a read. But I think to say that, knowing that she's had problems conceiving and how insensitive Greg has been to that, I think to another woman, you got to watch stuff like that. You got to be careful. You got to be careful. Because it's like talking about somebody's kid. It's like when you make fun of somebody who's slow or mentally challenged. That kind of stuff will come back on. You got to be careful with that. You got to be careful. I wouldn't play like that. And honestly, it wasn't necessary. And Quad, when you said she was very country and she calls you a Beverly Hillbilly first for that reunion, let me tell you something, Quad. When you actually explained, I don't know if it was an interview or what, when you were at TSU, other people at TSU were calling you country, you and some friends, and y'all decided y'all was going to go get some extra English books and figure out how to talk clearly. First of all, Quad, before I even knew that, this was like a year ago I learned this about you. I already knew your voice was fake. I already knew everything about the way you were talking was fake, and it was not true to who you are. It just wasn't. Okay? And it comes off as fake and phony. It's just like sometimes when Quad is crying or being extra, it looks like she's still acting, and it's not good acting. It's like Lifetime Tyler Perry acting. But I'm just sitting up here like, you actually let people at TSU, Tennessee State University, call you and your friends country. This hurts you so. At Tennessee State, okay? You let other people tease you about being country. Don't even get me started. And then you change your whole way of speaking, and it's weird. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. That's why I don't really like you, because I never trusted anybody who's that fake all the time. Heavenly versus Contessa. Heavenly, you're another one. It is very cruel, and as someone who has had, and people who have watched me, y'all know this, who has a mother who has experienced breast cancer twice, and has had to, get reconstructive surgery for them after, they removed, the cancerous elements. And Contessa purposely had a double mastectomy because cancer had run so heavily in her family. That's preventative. And Heavenly, you knew that. I knew that from watching the show. And then say your breasts are ugly. Her breasts are for Scott. They're not for you anyway. I don't care how somebody's body looks after that kind of surgery. it's a cruel thing to say because of why? Because she had this fear of breast cancer. And you know that. You know it's cruel. And Heavenly is crazy as fuck. Heavenly looks like she either takes medication or she needs it. And I'm not even being funny. Like, I mean, like extreme medication. I mean, I have a psychiatrist. I'm not sitting up here acting like, oh, I'm so above it. But I'm just making a point. Hers seems to be untreated for somebody in the medical community. And then you up here talking at the side of your neck. They brought the light-skinned girl out. That's the doctor psychiatrist. Honestly, she read all of them. And not like in a bad way, but she was like pointing out things. And I think she was very gracious and much more kind than other people have been to Sweet Tea when she was like, we want to support you, just tell us how. And I was thinking to myself, yeah, speak for yourself, but don't speak for Quada Heavenly or Toya. Anyway, so they bring the husbands or the men or whatever, and they separate. They say for security purposes. Now, they put Greg in a room by himself and then put all the men in the other one. Now, King, we know, would fuck Greg up. But they didn't put King in a separate room. It's because they don't value you, Greg, as part of the cast. They know the entertainment wouldn't come that way. Because even King was very quiet. The other people were just arguing around them or whatever. Greg, you are corny, trying to start a band. Eugene has read you the way you deserve to be read. And Eugene is not a mean person. He's not a mean-spirited person. You can tell. So when he starts like laughing at people, it's really because he thinks it's funny. Anyway, so they get out there. And Greg's old. He's so weird. He's so weird. I would not want that man touching me nowhere. And then Dr. Damon. Now, let me tell you something. Dr. Damon bossed up on your ass, and he said, I'm telling you man to man. I don't appreciate the stuff that you were saying. I don't appreciate how you were undermining me and my practice. I don't appreciate how you took business and made it about this show when you stopped seeing my patients, which is actually crazy work. I actually think that's illegal. If you don't have a reason to withdraw a patient and they all happen to be people that he had referred to him for business purposes, and then to get him back, you stop treating them. I don't know if y'all have ever had to have medications around things for anxiety, whatever it is. But those kind of medications, they're usually controlled substances by psychiatrists. And so if they get cut off, like even if you have just a few days in between, it can literally like make you oozy. It's like a weird thing. And for you to leave them out on their own, and a psychiatrist is not something, it's not like going to an ENT. You really need that person to understand what's wrong with you to try to help you. And that tells me, Greg, that you're not committed to the medicine more than the personal, which says to me, you need to step back. I don't care how many people go to you. People can go to bad psychiatrists because they don't have much choice around their insurance, not because they like them. A lot of psychiatrists are arrogant, they're rude, they're condescending, and they lack cultural competence, especially white ones. And so Greg is not a good look. And they brought up the text message. Apparently, I didn't know about this. When Heavenly called Dr. Greg a pedophile, because Cecil interfered and said, well, if we're going to talk about what wives said or didn't say, you know, Greg can make the same argument for you, Damon. You didn't correct Heavenly when she calls him a pedophile, and that's messed up. And Scott was like, yeah, that was too far. That was too far. And nobody can check Heavenly but Damon. So Damon has to be the one to do it. And he was like, yes, it was wrong. It was completely wrong. Right? And I'm like, you're only saying that now to get your point across. But when he said, I'm looking at you man to man, and you was talking all that stuff, and what that was cowardly, because you should have come to me. I said, ooh, yes, go off. I love people who don't always talk a lot, but when they say something, they have something to really say. And so you can respect them, as opposed to people like Greg who run their mouth all the time. But nevertheless, they got it kind of semi over with. We know Greg is going to go and disrespect him again. And I don't know, the way Damon leaned over that couch, I was like, yeah, Damon will whoop your ass. All right. Is it just me, or has Cecil gotten way too comfortable being on this show? Remember back when Cecil actually had a job? Okay. Anyway, so Simone and Quad toward the end. Speaking of Quad's fake ass voice, when she said, bitch, fuck you, that's the way she talked. That's her voice. And you could tell Quad was dead ass serious. They got into it. She was like, well, you brought this, that, and the other. Because they were already arguing. Heavenly and Sweet Tea going back and forth. She's calling him a bitch, calling her husband a bitch ass in and all that stuff. Even then, I still don't feel like Sweet Tea was nearly as aggressive as she could have been. I mean, she held her own. But I'm just like, that's why I feel like they're mean to her. Anyway, and Quad was like, y'all were messing around. I can feel a way about the fact that y'all brought Sweet Tea and Greg on here. This was my group of friends. And y'all run around hanging around with them. And you know Simone, who has no voice modulation. And she was like, yeah, we did. Because you gave us your ass to kiss. And yes, we did want to get back at you. You get what you turned out. You didn't want to be around us. So we did start hanging around Greg and Sweet Tea. And what? And then Quad got up in her face and said, what did she say? She was like, bitch, fuck you. I'll whoop your ass. Because you know it's uncensored on Peacock, right? It also tells me that to some degree, what makes it bad is all the extra bleeps. Some of that stuff ain't that bad. Anyway, and they get into it, but the way Quad was mad. And that's how you know they both thought they were each other's friend at one point. But Quad, that season, when you was on Sister Circle on TV One, which I never understood why it was on so long anyway, you did have this attitude that you had real friends, and those were the women you were working with, like Selena Johnson, and I forget her name, something Ali, because she had a real cute pixie. It was always Lady, but she's actually a journalist. But you were basically treating them like, I don't need y'all because now I have a real job. I'm on TV. You were acting like that. You were, and it wasn't a good look. And I do think it's good that she's happy with King, but a lot of these people just immature as hell and need to grow up. But if they were really intent on growing up, they probably wouldn't be on these shows. But anyway, those are just some thoughts. Be sure to put what you think in the comments, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Bye. Sorry, one more thing. Is it just me? Because I was looking at, and shout out to another Spelman sister, Latanya Richardson Jackson. She was on The View, and she was talking about the Broadway play Purpose, because she be doing her thing producing. She was the one who did the piano lesson and all that. And as she was talking, I was like, dang, she looks good. I mean, and she does look great. I mean, not just for her age. Like, she looks really beautiful, and her hair was cut short. And as I was watching it, the clip from The View, I said, you know who looks like her? You know who she looks like? Shamia on Real Housewives of Atlanta. Y'all go look it up. Go look up Latanya Richardson Jackson. That was and Shamia. And there can be two people who look alike, and one is pretty and one is still ugly. And I'm not calling anybody ugly, but I do think Latanya Richardson Jackson is a lot prettier than Shamia. I don't know what it is. Something about Shamia has always kind of rubbed me a little. But they look alike. And if I'm lying, y'all tell me. But I know I'm not lying. All right.